They say pain has a limit, that eventually your body just shuts down and you stop feeling anything at all. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. Pain doesn't end, it just changes shape. It becomes something you live inside of, like a second skin you can never take off. My name is Dmitri Volkov, and in the winter of 1942, during the Siege of Leningrad, I cut off my own leg with a spoon I found in the rubble of what used to be someone's kitchen. I was 23 years old. The siege had already been going on for more than a year when it happened. We weren't soldiers anymore by then. We were ghosts wearing uniforms, hollow-eyed specters who moved through the snow like we were already dead and just hadn't figured it out yet. The Germans had us surrounded, cutting off every supply line, every hope. The city was eating itself from the inside. First, the horses disappeared, then the cats and dogs, then the leather from belts and boots, boiled into a tasteless soup that at least filled your stomach with something, even if it was just the illusion of food. I remember the cold more than anything else. It wasn't just cold, it was a living thing, a predator that stalked you through every moment of every day. 40 degrees below zero, sometimes colder. Your breath would freeze in your lungs. Your eyelashes would stick together when you blinked, and if you stopped moving, even for a few minutes, you knew you might never move again. We were stationed in the Kirov factory district, what was left of it anyway. The Germans had bombed it so many times that you could untell where the buildings ended and the rubble began. Everything was gray. Gray snow, gray stone, gray sky. Even the blood looked gray when it froze on the ground. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because my mother used to make pierogi on Tuesdays, back when there was flour and butter in a world where mothers made food for their sons. I was on patrol with my unit, or what was left of it. 7 of us had started that morning. We were checking defensive positions along the factory perimeter, looking for German scouts, trying to stay alive for one more day. That's when the artillery started. You never hear the shell that hits near you. That's what they don't tell you. You just suddenly find yourself on the ground, and you don't know how you got there, and your ears are ringing so loud that you can't hear anything else, not even your own screaming. When I could finally see again through the smoke and snow, I realized I was alone. The others were gone, dead or scattered. I didn't know, and then I tried to stand up, and I understood. My left leg was trapped under a fallen beam, a massive piece of concrete and twisted metal that must have weighed 300 kilos, maybe more. It had crushed my leg just below the knee, pinning me to the frozen ground like an insect in a collection. I could see my boot sticking out from under the debris at an angle that legs do unnaturally bend. I didn't feel pain at first, that came later. At first there was just confusion, then a strange calm, then the slow, creeping understanding that I was going to die here. The temperature was dropping, I could feel it happening, degree by degree, as the winter sun disappeared behind the smoke-filled sky. I tried to move the beam. I pushed with everything I had, digging my fingers into the snow and ice, trying to find leverage, trying to find hope, but it didn't move, not even a centimeter. I called out for help. My voice sounded small and pathetic in all that emptiness. No one answered. The only sound was the distant thunder of artillery and the wind howling through the skeletal remains of the factory. That's when I felt it, the cold, working its way up my trapped leg like poison in the bloodstream. I knew what was happening. Frostbite in weather like this, it would take your flesh in minutes, and once it started, it wouldn't stop. First the toes, then the foot, then the leg, then the rest of you, until you were just another frozen corpse waiting for spring to reveal your body to whoever was left to bury it. I had maybe 2 hours before I lost consciousness, maybe 3 if I was lucky, though luck seemed like a word from another language, another lifetime. That's when I saw it. Half buried in the snow, maybe a meter from my hand. A spoon, just an ordinary spoon, the kind you'd use to eat soup, bent and rusted and crusted with frozen dirt. Someone had lived here once. Someone had eaten meals here, before the war came and turned everything into hell. I reached for it, my fingers were already numb, and it took me 3 tries to close my hand around it. And as I held it there, feeling the cold metal against my palm, I understood what I was going to have to do. There's a moment, right before you make a decision like that, when your mind tries to find another way, any other way. I thought about my mother, about whether she was still alive in her apartment on Nevsky Prospect. I thought about my younger sister Katya, who used to braid flowers into her hair in the summer. I thought about a girl named Anya who I'd kissed once before the war, whose lips tasted like apples and cigarettes and promises we both knew we couldn't keep. I thought about living, and I thought about dying, and then I started digging. The ground was frozen solid, like trying to dig through iron. But around my leg, where the blood had soaked into the snow, it was softer. I dug with my hands, with the spoon, with anything I could use, creating a small trench around my trapped leg. My fingers were bleeding. I couldn't feel them anymore, but I could see the blood, bright red against the white snow, the only color in all that grayness. When I dug down far enough, I could see it. My leg. The bone was crushed, shattered by the weight of the beam. The flesh was already turning black with frostbite, dead tissue that would kill me if I didn't cut it away. I'd seen field amputations before. Every soldier had. You held the man down while the medic sawed through the bone. And you tried not to look at his face, tried not to hear his screaming. But there was no medic here. There was no saw. There was just me. and a rusty spoon, and a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. I started with the flesh. The spoon was dull, but I pressed it against the dead skin, and I dragged it back and forth, like I was trying to cut through rope. The frozen flesh cracked and tore. I felt nothing at first. The cold had numbed everything, but then I got deeper, past the dead tissue, into the parts that were still alive, and that's when the pain came. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, I've been burned. Nothing in this world compares to the feeling of cutting through your own body with a rusty spoon. I screamed until my throat was raw, until I couldn't make sounds anymore, only gasping, choking noises that sounded like an animal dying in a trap. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop, because stopping meant dying, and some small part of me, some stubborn, stupid part of me, still wanted to live. The muscle was harder, it was stringy and tough, and the spoon kept slipping. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Blood was everywhere, steaming in the cold air, melting the snow around me into pink slush. I thought I might pass out. I wanted to pass out, but I didn't. I stayed conscious through every second of it, feeling every scrape of metal against tissue, every snap of tendon. The bone was the worst. You can't cut through bone with a spoon. You have to break it. I bent my leg back and forth, feeling the broken pieces grind against each other, working it like you'd work a piece of wire until it snaps. I heard it break before I felt it, a wet cracking sound that echoed off the ruined walls around me. And then, finally, I was free. I pulled myself away from the beam, dragging my body through the snow with my arms. Behind me, I left a trail of blood in the bottom half of my left leg, still wearing my boot, still trapped under all that concrete. It looked strange, lying there like it belonged to someone else. I tied my belt around the stump, pulling it as tight as I could, trying to stop the bleeding. My hands wouldn't cooperate. Everything was shaking. Everything was cold. I could feel myself starting to fade, the edges of my vision going dark and soft. I don't remember crawling. I don't remember how I made it back to our lines, half a kilometer through the snow, leaving a red trail behind me like some wounded animal. But somehow I did. Someone found me. Someone carried me to a field hospital, where a doctor with hollow eyes and hands that smelled like carbolic acid shook his head and said I would probably die from infection. But I didn't die. I don't know why. Maybe I was too stubborn. Maybe I'd already survived the worst thing that could happen to me, and everything after that was just details. They evacuated me across Lake Ladoga, across the road of life, as we called it. The ice road where trucks carried supplies into the starving city and carried the dying out. I was one of the lucky ones. They said I would live, I would go home. I spent the rest of the war in a hospital in Vologda learning to walk on a wooden leg that never fit quite right, that rubbed my stump raw and made me feel like a stranger in my own body. I learned to ignore the stares, the pitying looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. When the war finally ended, I went back to Leningrad. My mother was gone, starved to death in the first winter of the siege. My sister, too, the girl I'd kissed, Anya with the apple-tasting lips, had been killed in an artillery strike. The city was full of ghosts, and I was just another one of them. I'm an old man now, 86 years old, if you can believe it. I've outlived almost everyone I knew. I've outlived the Soviet Union itself. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I can still feel my missing leg. Phantom pain, they call it. The ghost of something that isn't there anymore but somehow still hurts. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I wish I'd just stayed there under that beam and let the cold take me, instead of going through all that pain. All those years of walking on a wooden leg, all the nightmares that still wake me up some nights, gasping and sweating, back in that frozen factory with a spoon in my hand. I tell them no. I tell them I chose to live, and that matters. That even in the middle of all that horror, all that death and cold and hunger, I chose to live. Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was pointless, maybe all the suffering I went through wasn't worth the years I got in return, but it was my choice, mine. And in a war where so many millions had every choice stripped away from them, where they died because someone else decided they should die, I claimed one small piece of control over my own fate. I cut off my own leg with a rusty spoon, and I survived, and I'm still here to tell you about it. That has to mean something, even if I'm not sure what.